I'm Tracy Ellis Ross.
I'm Kamel Nanjiani.
And we are so excited to announce this year's Oscar nominees.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
But so let's not keep anyone else out there waiting.
Hey, last chance.
Of fathers and sons.
Black Klansman. Yalitza Aparicio in Roma.
Yes, me nominated.
I'm standing here as an almost 62-year-old man having an Oscar nomination.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Academy Governors Rory Kennedy and Roger Ross Williams.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Rory Kennedy, and it's so great to be here. I just thought I would start with a little advice, which is that if you go to the Sundance Film Festival, I highly recommend that you watch films and don't go skiing like I did. Anyway, it's so great to be here tonight to celebrate these incredible films that these filmmakers have brought to us, both the shorts and the features. And it's just such an honor to be amongst you and to have this moment to really celebrate the work that you've done over these last couple of years, many of you. So thank you. And I will say, as of about 3.5 hours ago, the voting is done. So no matter what you say up here or do up here, it's not going to affect your vote. So we really want you to go all out tonight, reveal your true selves. But no, I do want to just take a moment to really acknowledge the sheer brilliance of the films that came out this year. And as a governor of the Academy, I've been approached by so many other members in the Academy and other governors from different branches saying how remarkable this group of documentaries are. And, you know, I think it's really an outstanding group of films this year in particular and has really stood out. So we're so proud of you, and I'm so proud to be associated as a documentary filmmaker with you all and to be in this branch and be connected to the work that you do. So thank you for your incredible efforts and your talents, and we're so happy to be here tonight to be able to acknowledge that and celebrate that artistry and the beauty that you bring to these films and all the work that it entails and bringing it to the screen and these incredible stories that you've brought to our lives. So thank you all to the filmmakers, and I know the Academy itself is incredibly supportive and proud of your films as well. And I've been, as I said, told that over and over again by different members. But the Academy is very supportive of documentaries in general. And so I want to thank them for hosting this night for us and for bringing these films to such a wonderful audience, but also to recognize all the work they do over the course of a year to celebrate documentaries. This year, for example, the governors brought the idea of celebrating the shortlisted documentaries, and with the support of the Board of Governors, we brought those 15 films to theaters all across the country during that short period, and we thank you. And we worked with the filmmakers here who are here tonight. We also worked with the exhibitors and the distributors. And it was a really wonderful experience all around. And I think that it's a program that we're going to hope to do again next year. And I think a number of the other branches, in seeing the success that happened with the documentaries and the short list here, are going to try to replicate it as well. So we're also showing some leadership in this branch and appreciate you guys spearheading that and leading us on this incredible journey. So, and thank you to the Academy for all of its support for this beautiful art form. It is now my great pleasure to turn it over to my friend and to my colleague and amazing, extraordinary documentary filmmaker, Roger Ross Williams.
Thank you, Rory. You memorized your speech. So yeah, it's been an incredible year for documentary films. And you know, what's amazing this year is that we have an amazingly diverse group of nominees. You know, as one of the few Black governors on the Board of Governors, for me, diversity is essential and really important. You know, I think that the Academy, the documentary branch especially, needs to reflect the world we live in. So I just want to talk a little bit about some of the work we've done over the last few years. We've made great strides under the Academy's A2020 5-year diversity initiative. The documentary branch has added over 80 new diverse voices to our branch in the last few years. I think a couple years ago we had only 7 Latino members in the whole entire documentary branch. We added 11 more last year, and we are pushing hard to change that demographic because that's a problem. In the branch, we have 48% of the documentary branch are female. And, this year, I sort of challenged the branch to reach gender parity, 50-50. The documentary branch, which is so progressive and one of the most diverse branches in the Academy, should reflect the world, and we should have gender parity. So I challenge anyone in this room who's a member of the documentary branch to nominate a woman, because this year we can get to 50-50 gender parity. Speaking of change, we sort of changed the way we're going to do this event tonight. We are actually, instead of a panel, I'm sure all the filmmakers have done a lot of panels recently, and they're sick of panels, so we're not going to do the Q&A panel. What we're going to do is we are going to invite each filmmaking group up to this podium. They will say, for 5 minutes, introduce their clip. So they'll say a story. It can't be thank yous, though. It really needs to be a story about your film or your process, or whatever you want to say, but not thanking everyone. And I'm going to take a moment right now and thank everyone who worked on all the films. So, so all of the composers and the cinematographers and the musicians and even the financiers, everyone who worked on the film. Let's just a round of applause to thank all of them. Get it all out of the way. I'm going to introduce the short subject documentaries tonight. These films have often played a vital role in illuminating the difficult and challenging subject matter. This year's nominees include a film that forces us to confront racism in a very unique and interesting way, a film that challenges us to think differently about the end of life, a film that puts a human face on one of the most horrific humanitarian crises of our time, a film that shines a light on demagoguery that seems as relevant today as it did 80 years ago, and an inspiring film about a group of young women fighting against deep stigma in their country. Documentary shorts, which are close to my heart, are films that are so powerful in a short amount of time and can really affect change and really shine the light on a circumstance in our lives. So I would like now to invite to invite and congratulate the documentary short subject filmmakers, and you will each be called to the stage one by one. Congratulations to the nominees. Thank you.
Please welcome the nominees for Black Sheep, Ed Perkins, director, and Jonathan Chin, producer.
Wow, thank you. It's a little overwhelming. Thank you very much for having us. Thank you to the Academy. It is an enormous privilege. I know I'm not supposed to say thank you. I've already broken the rules. But it does mean everything to be up here, and especially to be nominated alongside films which I think the world of. They're important films, and they're beautifully made, and we both feel very honored to be in the same group, in the same room as them. It's often said that documentary film is having a bit of a sort of renaissance, and it's a golden era, and it's an amazing time to make these films. It's also a really important time to make these films, and all the films in the room are allowing us to view the world in a really important and poignant way. So yeah, we feel very privileged to be here. So our film is called Black Sheep. It's about an extraordinary young man who I'm very proud to say is here today. His name's Cornelius Walker, and he's allowed us into his world and told a story which I think is very, very important. I think as documentary filmmakers, we're nothing without brave young men and women of any age who are willing to sit in front of our cameras and bare their souls. And I think what Cornelius has done for us is astonishing. I met him in a coffee shop. We've got mutual friends, and with all the sort of candor and charisma and bravery that you see in the film, he started to tell me about this part of his life, and he blew me away. And we stayed in contact, and we built a relationship of trust. And I eventually asked him if he'd let me help him bring his story to the world, and thankfully he said yes. I'm totally indebted to you, Cornelius. You're an extraordinary young man, and we feel very proud to have been a small part in helping bring this story to the screen. Just for a few, we shot a master interview over 2 days, and then we took a slightly unusual approach. Once we'd shot the master interview and edited that, we decided that we could have done visualizations through animation, but instead we decided to take a slightly sort of hybrid approach. We went back to the actual town where these events happened in Cornelius's life. And all the places that you see in the film are the exact places where the events happened 20 years ago. We found young men and women who live in that town, and we persuaded them to help us bring some of these difficult memories in Cornelius's life to life in front of him. So everyone you see in the film are non-actors, they're real people who live there, and I think what they've done in allowing us to tell this important story is very important. And then, yeah, we shot for a couple of days, and we think it's a difficult film. It's a complicated film, but we think it's an important film, and we hope that it starts a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, as people who know about short films, there's no business model for short films. You don't get into making a short film to make money or anything like that. And this film, we hope, has a life after this amazing honor. We plan to show it in schools, universities, and hopefully it can illuminate and express to other kids who are going through issues of trying to deal with their own identity issues. And hopefully this film can have a life beyond this great honor. So we're going to show a little clip now, and hope that you guys enjoy the clip. Thank you.
I remember sitting in the backseat, and I'm seeing the whole of Peckham just flash by right behind my eyes. So like you see the mosques, the big Peckham Library, the churches. It was my London, my multicultural London. So we keep going now, and all I see is horses, I see cows, like what? Where are we going? And then, you know when you're driving and you get the speed limits and the 3 bars and it goes 2, then 1. And so I'm just like looking at that, I'm just like, yeah. I see pitch black, I'm asleep. Wake up now, see this house. I'm like, that's my house. I remember my dad just grabbing me, just like, you better behave yourself. The first week we were there, I just stayed inside my house. I didn't really go out, I didn't want to do much. And then one day my mom just asked me to go to the shops for her. I remember walking out my house and walking down this long path. And all I saw was white people. Like literally just different shades of white. So I go to the shop, but when I enter the shop, everyone keeps looking at me, like staring at me. And then the cashier just gave me this kind of like, what are you? I'm just like, okay, cool. So next thing you know, I finish buying what I need to buy from the shop. And I walk down the road and all I hear is, "Oi, nigger!" What? Oi, nigger! I look up, I see a little boy calling me a nigger. And then he looks at me, just stares at me and starts making monkey sounds. I basically got home and I just kept it to myself. Like, how could I tell my mom, hey, the area you moved us to, they're kind of racist. Is there a way you can like get a return on the house that you just paid for and just, send us back? And I can't go to my dad telling him someone called me a nigger because he's gonna think I'm weak. And if I cry in front of my dad, he's gonna think I'm even weaker. At that age, I was trying to look up to my dad. I was trying to be a man. I was trying to get my dad's love and my dad's affection. And I just really wanted my dad to love me. And it's not like he didn't love me. He just had a very hard way of showing it. And at that age, I didn't want to show him any kind of weakness. Remember when I was young, like whenever we, got my dad angry, he would beat his chest as loud as he possibly could and say, "I'm a lion." Do you know what a lion is? He's the king of the jungle. It means you can't mess with a lion. And I just got that in my system. If he's a lion, then I must be the son of a lion. And I can't show weakness. So I just went into my room, I closed the door. I just screamed as loud as I possibly could, but with nothing coming out my mouth.
Please welcome the nominees for Endgame, Rob Epstein, director-producer, and Jeffrey Friedman, director-producer.
Hi. Rob and I have been making documentaries together for 30 years. Endgame is a departure for us in a number of ways. First, it's most of our films have dealt with historical subjects, meaning that we're telling stories about things that have already happened, and knowing the stories we wanted to tell, we've been able to map out the structure of the film before we began. And this film is almost entirely observational, so we had no idea how the stories would unfold as we were shooting them. In our previous films, we spent a long time researching and doing pre-interviews to choose the storytellers and the stories that we wanted to tell. And in this case, we didn't meet the storytellers or know their stories until we walked into the room and began filming them. Maybe the biggest difference is that in earlier films, we always worked with professional crews. It always made sense to us to work with experienced craftspeople who we knew would give us beautiful pictures and sound and just focus on directing. In this case, we were the crew. Rob and our co-producer, Rebecca Ferguson, did most of the camera work. I recorded much of the sound. And because of that, we were able to be very nimble in unpredictable situations. We were filming people as they approached the end of life, and we never knew when somebody would take a turn for the worse or the better. But we were able to respond to that, and we were essentially on call for 24 hours a day. But just as important, or more important, working on such a small scale allowed us an intimacy with the people we were filming that I don't think we would have been able to achieve otherwise. One of the hardest things about making this film has been explaining to people what it's about. I've yet to come up with an elevator pitch that doesn't evoke a look of pain or even dread in the listener, which is maybe not the response you want for an elevator pitch. So in the making of the film, because it's such a heavy subject, we were always looking for moments of levity to ease the tension. And you'll be happy to hear that the scenes we're showing tonight contain examples of some of that.
Okay, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the scenes themselves. So we're showing 3 scenes in sequence as they appear in the film. And the first scene is with Mitra and Baji. Mitra was the main patient that we follow, and Baji is her mother. And at this point in the filmmaking process, Mitra had been in and out of consciousness, but this particular night, she was in great form, and we got to experience her in all of her humanity, her humor, her curiosity, her love for her family, her love for life, her just general goodness all came shining through in this one evening that we had with her. So that's the first scene. The big risk in a project like this is that, doing it by necessity, it's so intense and so intimate. But the risk was that it could also feel exploitative, and that's something that we were certainly sensitive to all along the way. And usually as documentary filmmakers, we do everything we can to get the subjects to not acknowledge the camera, to not acknowledge the filmmakers. But in the second scene, you'll see we welcomed an opportunity where that was really turned around, and we were acknowledged as welcome participants, and we really were grateful for that moment to let the audience have that same experience that we had in the moment. And then the third scene is with B.J. Miller, who's one of the 2 palliative care physicians we follow in the film. This scene was shot by Rebecca, my co-cinematographer and our co-producer, who actually taught Jeffrey and me how to use the gear. So thank you, Rebecca, for teaching these 2 old dogs some new tricks. And lastly, I know we're not supposed to do thanks, but I would feel remiss if I didn't thank our documentary peers for getting us here tonight. We really appreciate the honor and the privilege to be among all these nominees, and we really, really are thankful for this recognition. So thank you very much.
I'm glad that you ate more today. That's a good sign. You look like you have a little more color today.
This is my major plan, to be able to walk.
Well, that's a good goal to keep in your mind.
Just being independent and being in a positive mood.
She's trying very hard. Very hard.
I try. But I feel like I'm against two walls. You know.
You have to try to stay.
For the road.
One for your
I'll
wife.
take you. I'll take one or two more.
Wine.
We'll have them tonight for dessert. That's enough. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
One more.
Okay, one
Maybe
more.
you drink wine.
Not tonight.
I don't know if you want to
Not
have
tonight.
kid.
Yeah?
If you are thinking about having kid.
If you and your wife eat one date a day, your baby 100% is gonna be boy.
Oh yeah.
Boy?
I don't
That's
believe
good to
that,
know.
but
Is that
they
what they
say.
I just thought.
Is that what you did? Did you eat a date?
I don't know.
Okay, Mitra, I'm gonna go. Have a wonderful night with your sister tonight.
Thank you very
And your
much.
husband.
It's gonna be a great night tonight. This is Azita. These are all the team of my new friends.
I see.
Of 2017. What do you think?
من گرفتم به شما نگرفتم
Apologies.
اینا منو خیلی دوست دارن فقط تو جلوی دهن منه بلند
بعدا ترجمه میکنن
بکنن اشکالی
زیرنویسی تو قشنگ می‌نویسی.
اشکالی نداره بکنن من راست
ایرانی میشه
من می‌دونم.
Nice shoes. Not yet. Let's talk about that shortness of breath. But the bigger reason to be here today is really to continue to talk through this crazy thing called death.
Yeah, you gave me an assignment.
Yeah.
You told me to make friends with death.
Yeah.
I have failed the assignment.
Yeah. Okay.
Failed.
Okay.
I love to live.
Yeah.
I am not accepting this.
Friends with death may be pretty tough. But maybe what I more meant would have been to have some sort of relationship with it, with this subject.
Okay.
It doesn't need to be friendly at all. Just so that it's less scary than this unknown thing in the closet that we never look at, never see, never touch.
You know, I think the scary part is the unknown
Mm-hmm.
and the lack of control.
Yeah. Is the unknown what it's going to feel like to actually be dying, or what it's going to be like to be dead?
Both.
Because I don't think that, from where I said, I'm not sure that we can know what it's like to be dead.
No.
From here. You tell me if you feel otherwise. But given that that's not possible, next up would be, okay, if we can't change that, well, maybe we can get used to it a little bit. So maybe in terms of the being dead part, maybe that's our goal, is to kind of get used to this idea of being able to hold this idea of not knowing, holding the mystery.
Yeah.
And
That makes sense.
that I think is it's a more realistic goal than solving that mystery.
Yeah.
So does
And
that
also
grab you?
maybe trusting a little bit. It could be terrible, but it could be wonderful. This part of my life is wonderful. And who would have thought?
I will tell you, Tekla, and from doing this work and being near people who are at the very, very end, everything I've ever seen would suggest that wherever we're going, whatever abyss we're meeting, ain't so bad.
Really?
All I can say is from what I've seen, and people in the final moments crossing over, and from reports of people who have have gone and come back, and I don't know that that proves anything, but it's just maybe worth noting that just empirically, I don't know that it's so bad.
think there has to be something to those reports.
Seems likely. They're pretty dang consistent.
They are consistent.
And maybe it's enough at least to warrant a little leap of faith on your part.
Yeah.
Please welcome the nominees for Lifeboat: Sky Fitzgerald, director-producer; Bryn Mooser, producer.
Wow. Look at that. Had to do it. Okay. Several years ago, I broke my hand in a bicycle race. And when I finally landed a consultation with the orthopedic hand surgeon, I was fortunate enough to meet a Syrian-American surgeon who, after he looked at my hand in a couple minutes, said, "Yep, you need surgery," and then struck up a conversation with me about the Syrian conflict. And 5 minutes turned into 15 minutes, and 15 minutes turned into almost an hour. And at the end of that hour, I handed him my card and asked him if he would call me if he ever decided to return to Syria. That led to a film called 50 Feet from Syria. And as we finished filming that project, I suspected that the scale of the refugee crisis, catalyzed not only by the Syrian conflict, but by unrest throughout the Middle East and Northern Africa, was going to deeply influence the global politics surrounding refugees and asylum seekers. And when the EU closed the humanitarian corridor for asylum seekers through Greece in 2016, nearly every NGO worker that we knew told us that the EU authorities were not prepared for what would happen next, that a central Mediterranean refugee route leaving from the beaches of Libya in an attempt for asylum seekers to gain UNHCR vetting via the southern border of the EU was going to result in a very high mortality rate. And when we began researching this, we discovered it was already happening. We also soon learned that a small group of private citizens had purchased an old vessel, a research vessel, put together an all-volunteer crew, and set off to assist the rafts of asylum seekers. And I was inspired and astonished. And so, like so often happens in documentaries, we talked our way to access and eventually embedded with a single search and rescue operation 24 miles off the coast of Libya. On day 2 and 3 of that search and rescue operation, we encountered over 3,000 asylum seekers floating in makeshift boats in the middle of the ocean. And with no other rescue vessel in sight, our rescue operations mission and task was to try to evacuate these thousands of human beings from rafts and boats before they sank or people died from exposure. No easy task on a 30-meter boat with 16 crew. As people were pushed into the water, fell into the water, sometimes jumped into the water, we immediately faced the age-old dilemma of the documentarian. At what point, if any, do you intervene? And as people floundered, and often those without life vests began to drown, we pretty quickly abandoned any notions of pure observation and simply put our cameras down and helped pull people out of the sea and into the Zodiac before they could drown. And though the film that we made from this experience may have been very different if we'd made a different choice, and in fact the film we did make may have suffered for it, our crew was okay with that. In the end, we safely evacuated all but 2 people. We lost 1 woman to exposure and 1 man who drowned in front of our Zodiac before we could reach him. But over 3,200 human beings were pulled from the ocean to continue their lives free from the horrors of war and privation that they were leaving behind. The sequence you're about to see is from the middle of the film, once first contact had been made, but before the search and rescue operators were able to transport the refugees and asylum seekers to a safer vessel. Thank you. Thank you.
read about the political state of the world or the environmental state of the world, and it's all going to hell in the handcart. So maybe the hope in the humans is some totally mad, irrational thing we got. But we've got it anyway. You know, rationality is wildly overplayed. You know, yeah, the brain and the mind, yeah, it's a useful tool, but the heart is where your real thinking comes.
Please welcome the nominee for A Night at the Garden, Marshall Curry, director, producer.
You guys know Ryan Harrington? He constantly makes fun of my clothes, and he told me at Sundance this year that he thought I'd be more likely to win the Oscar if I got rid of this string that I wear around my glasses to keep from losing them. So A Night at the Garden. I think we're might be able to see the whole thing in this. We're pretty close to it. I was told that it's the shortest doc nominated in 50 years. I don't know if that's something good or bad. I maybe shouldn't be leading with that. But I first heard about this when I was at dinner about a year and a half ago with a friend of mine who's writing a screenplay that takes place in New York in 1939. And he'd been doing some research, and he said, "Did you know that there was a rally in Madison Square Garden where 20,000 Americans gathered to celebrate the rise of Nazism?" And I actually didn't believe him. We argued for a while, and I got home that night and looked it up, and sure enough, he was right. And there were some historical documentaries that had little 5 or 10 second clips in them of that rally. And so I figured, well, if there's 10 seconds of this thing, there's got to be more than that. And so I called Rich Remsburg, who's an archival researcher and a friend, and said, "Hey, could you look around and see what you could find about this thing?" And so he contacted the National Archive and UCLA's archive and Grinberg archive and a number of places, and discovered that they all had pieces of this footage. Nobody had really gathered it all together, and like the National Archive had they had film that they'd never scanned high def before, and some places had audio that video didn't match, and video that there was no audio. But anyway, we gathered it all together, and I remember just sort of starting to watch it, and was totally stunned. I was stunned that this was something that had happened in my country, in my city where I live, that I'd never heard of, and I was stunned by how sort of dark and surreal it seemed, and I was also stunned by how familiar it all seemed. You've got a leader who attacks the press and scapegoats minorities and cheers violence against protesters, and does all that while wrapping it in the symbols and icons of American patriotism. And so I first thought that maybe I would make a more traditional documentary where I would interview some historians that would explain what this was. And one night, sort of on a whim, I almost just decided to see what it would feel like if I edited it like a verite documentary, which is something that I do. I make verite and other kinds of documentaries, but and so what would it feel like to just drop somebody into this scene without any explanation? And I found that I really liked that. It was disorienting, and it was and it kind of sucked you in a little bit to try to figure out what the hell was going on. Like, what is this? There were a number of things that I thought were particularly shocking about it, but the main thing that I thought was shocking about it was the audience's reaction. I feel like I know that there are bad leaders in the world, but when I saw the audience, the sort of lightness with which they took this attack on people who would be murdered by the millions in the next few years, in the years following this, and these are people who would be my neighbors in Brooklyn. They've got suits and ties and hats and dresses, and they've dropped off their kids that afternoon with the babysitter on their way to the rally, and it was just sort of a horrifying insight into humanity that people who might be my neighbors could be spun into, could have a spell cast on them by a demagogue who was funny and charismatic and mean, and anyway, I thought that this would be something that if we could just release it to the world, surely people would see it as a cautionary tale and maybe become a little more sensitized and vigilant when they see demagogues today using similar tactics. So the anniversary of this rally is tomorrow. 80 years ago, tomorrow is when this rally took place. And so last night, the team from Field of Vision, Laura Poitras and Charlotte Cook, and some folks who work with me and some folks who work at First Look Media, got together with a video artist, and they projected footage from our film on the outside of Madison Square Garden. And it's beautiful and eerie and unsettling, and there's some photographs and some videos of it that we're just finishing sorting through, and we're tossing out onto social media and stuff. But it was so creepy because it's a little bit translucent. The projector was across the street, so it had to have a really strong throw to get up onto the walls of Madison Square Garden. And it's sort of, as you watch these people gathering and doing Nazi salutes and beating up protesters, and it feels like ghosts from 80 years ago coming back to warn us about our current political situation. But anyway, I know I'm not to say thanks, but thanks to all of the rest of the filmmakers and and to the team that made this film possible. So here's some, or maybe all, of A Night at the Garden.
Undivided allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ladies and gentlemen, fellow Americans, American patriots, I'm sure I do not come before you tonight as a complete stranger. You all have heard of me through the Jewish-controlled press as a creature with horns, a cloven hoof, and a long tail. We, with American ideals, demand that our government shall be returned to the American people who founded it. If you ask what we are actively fighting for under our charter, first, a social just white Gentile ruled United States. Second, Gentile-controlled labor union, free from Jewish Moscow-directed domination.
Please welcome the nominees for Period End of Sentence. Rika Zatabchi, director. Melissa Burton, producer.
Hi. So I'm an English teacher in a high school, so you might rightly imagine that my idea of excitement is a large pot of tea and a well-placed comma. And so I think you will believe me when I say that in 2013, when a group of students approached me in my classroom and asked me if I would be the faculty sponsor for an organization called Girls Learn International, I embarked on what would be the most profound journey of my life, and I know of many others as well. Girls Learn International is an organization under the auspices of the Feminist Majority Foundation. It seeks to give high school students a voice in the global movement for equal access to education for all genders. As part of that initiative, they send high school students to the United Nations at the age of 16 to be on the floors of ECOSOC in the United Nations advocating for girls and women. And it was there that we learned about this issue of girls their own age missing school because of their period, because of the onset of menstruation. And we also learned at the same time about an inventor named Morgan Anthem who had made a sanitary pad making machine that would not only provide affordable pads, but would also provide a microeconomy for the women who ran the machine. And so maybe because we're from Los Angeles, we immediately thought we need to raise awareness about this, and we can only do this through film. We also need to get a pad machine and get a year's worth of supplies to the village in India. We have Guneet Munga with us from India tonight, who's our executive producer, who just flew in this morning. I don't know how she's awake. But we were able to do it, and 6 years and many twists and turns, we're here.
Hi, I'm Rika. I'm the director of Period End of Sentence, and when I was first brought on to direct this documentary, I remember walking into a room. It was at Oakwood School in Los Angeles, and it was Melissa's English office, and there were a group of like 15 or 16-year-old young girls in front of me. And I learned that day that they would ultimately be the executive producers of this film. So me, fresh out of USC Film School, literally a week out of film school, and 23 years old, I'd never made a documentary before. And every grain in my body was absolutely ecstatic and so excited to join this movement. When we arrived in India, I think it was transformative for me in so many ways, especially as a young woman, seeing that these women have gone their entire lives never talking to another human being about their periods, about this natural thing that we women experience every single month, that they'd gone their entire lives thinking that they had something wrong with them. There was something inherently wrong with them. We learned there that this pad machine would change these women's lives, and it would empower them, and it would give them a voice that they felt they never had. And I think we've really seen how powerful this movement can be, and it's been an incredible honor. I get just emotional thinking about it, not because I'm on my period or anything, but it's. I've been waiting to use that line for a while. But it's been incredible to see that if a group of people who have no experience in any of this can really put their minds and their hearts together and band together for the greater good, we really can change the world. And I think as a filmmaker, I've learned a lot of things in the past couple of years, especially how to do an Oscars campaign. But I think the most important thing I've learned is that documentary filmmaking is absolutely essential for our lives and for our culture, and that we can actually help to change the way a culture thinks about menstruation through a documentary film, and that ultimately we've been successful enough to start a global movement and campaign to help women worldwide own their bodies and own the thing that gives us strength. So thank you. And this clip that you're about to see is actually the first 3 minutes of the film, and it will give you a glimpse into their world. Thank you.
Period? बता बता पर कहीं ना जाती है, शर्म लगा है। शर्म आती है? कहीं ना जाती है। अच्छा, आप इतने सीरियस क्यों हो गए?
शरीर के अंदर क्या होता है, होने की क्या वजह है, ये सब पूछना क्यों निकलता है, कोई कारण?
यही तो भगवान ही पता हो, ये गंदा खून निकले।
बच्चे पैदा होते हैं उसी से, बस इतना ही पता है हमें तो।
यहाँ पे किसको पता है पीरियड्स क्या होते हैं? नाम सुने?
ये तो ये घंटे वाले पीरियड्स जो मतलब कॉलेज में चलते हैं।
नहीं।
Girls, I am asking to you. Why are you not answering?
महामारी सुना है?
हाँ जी सुना था, बीमारी का नाम तो सुना है, शायद बीमारी है महामारी की।
बीमारी है?
हाँ सुना था, जैसे बीमारी हो ज़्यादातर लेडीज़ों को होती है ये।
Girls, hands to raise कर सकती हैं आप लोग? This is the girls' problem. बोलो।
पढ़ते गए, जब तक बड़ी क्लास में चलते गए, पढ़ते गए, फिर जब हमारे उसके बाद पीरियड होने लगे तो हमें दिक्कत आने लगी बहुत ज़्यादा। परेशानी ये थी हमें कि हम जब पीरियड होते थे हमें उन्हें चेंज करने में बहुत ज़्यादा दिक्कत आती थी, बहुत ज़्यादा दूर जाना पड़ता था, बहुत ज़्यादा परेशानी आती थी। कपड़ा लेते वो बहुत ज़्यादा गीला था, इसलिए बार बार चेंज करना पड़ता था और बार बार हम जाना पड़ता था, हमें बहुत दिक्कत आती। फिर इधर उधर लड़के भी रहते हैं, आदमी भी रहते हैं, दिखते हैं, कपड़ा बदलते हैं, चेंज करते हैं, उनके सामने थोड़ी बदल पाते हैं हम। पीरियड होने के मतलब 1 साल तक हमने बाद तक देखा कि कुछ हो जाए, कुछ नहीं हो पाया। जब हमें ज़्यादा दिक्कत होने लगी तो फिर इसलिए हमने छोड़ दिया।
Please welcome back Academy Governor Rory Kennedy.
Thank you. Let's just take a moment to really applaud these extraordinary shorts that are so profound and relevant and incredible filmmaking. So thank you again to all of the short filmmakers and congratulations to all of you. It is now my honor to introduce the 5 feature documentaries that have been nominated for an Academy Award. As I mentioned earlier, it's been a particularly stellar year for documentaries. In regards to box office, this is the first year we've seen 4 documentary films in the box office make over $10 million. And there have been, which is amazing, and there have been 15 documentaries that have made over $1 million. And so that's never happened before. It's not necessarily the most important metric, but I think it is relevant and something to recognize. I also appreciate that our branch has given due consideration to all of the contenders, even smaller films without significant backing or box office. This year we had 166 submissions in the feature documentary category. We reviewed every single one of those films. And so for the nominees, let's just take a moment to again recognize how extraordinary it is that your 5 films made it and have been nominated for an Academy Award. You guys are the best of the best, and we're so appreciative and grateful for what you have brought to the screen and shared with us. And a big congratulations to all of you. As a governor, like Roger, working to broaden our membership, I'm also very happy to see that this year's nominees reflect a diverse group of filmmakers who took on diverse subject matter. We have an exploration of Black Southern life, a film about radical Islamist family. We bear witness to an epic rock climb. We are given a window into the world of skateboard culture and family violence. And finally, a biopic celebrating a legendary Supreme Court justice. Such different worlds, all of them. And what it shows is how so many subjects, whether they are foreign to us or familiar, when approached by talented filmmakers, they can deepen our understanding about the people around us and the world in which we live. It is my honor now to introduce the feature documentary section of our program. I hope you enjoy.
Please welcome the nominees for Free Solo: Elizabeth Chai Vasarely, Director-Producer; Jimmy Chin, Director-Producer; Evan Hayes, Producer; Shannon Dill, Producer.
Good evening. I'm Chai. This is Jimmy. We are producing, directing partners, and this is Shannon and Evan, who produced Free Solo with us. I just threw some water. Just to kind of pick up on what Rory was talking about, I think we all love stats. And one of my favorite stats in terms of measuring how moviegoers have been supporting, seeing, and celebrating nonfiction films this year is I think that in 2018, nonfiction films made over $113 million in the box office, which is crazy. It just doesn't happen. So anyway, it's been a privilege to be part of this community and to quote our fellow nominee Bing Liu, hopefully it's the Iron Age and not the Golden Age, and this is just the beginning. Bing, I borrowed that. And I guess we wanted to just to introduce the clip that we're showing tonight. We just kind of want to tell a story about. So for those of you who do not know, Free Solo chronicles Alex Honnold's dream and attempt to free solo Yosemite's El Capitan. And to free solo means to climb without ropes or any safety equipment. So literally climbing with your hands and feet, 3,200 feet in the air. This film, and him connect. So this film was kind of like a quagmire of ethical questions, as well as, which led to this idea of why would we even put ourselves in this situation? Because it was so dangerous, it's so risky, and it had an existential ethical question at center which is a question that applies to all nonfiction, but it's more extreme in this case, which is that in the act of filming, are we likely to cause him to fall? Is he more likely to fall because we're there? And so we had to wrestle with this pretty deeply. And we kind of came up with we landed in 3 places, which was, 1, do we believe in what Alex is doing? And Alex has thought more deeply about his own mortality than anyone else I know. He has chosen to live this life with great intention, and we were moved by that. we were also moved by, like, he clearly does, Alex is not a maverick, which sounds crazy, but when you see the movie, like, you understand he's actually not a maverick. He very much wants to live. He's just incredibly precise, and he was a kid who found it more scary to speak to another person than to go out and climb without a rope. Because without another person there, you have to climb without a rope, you don't have a partner. But he always wanted to connect. So, like, he saw other people eating vegetables, so he taught himself how to eat vegetables. He was never hugged, he taught himself how to hug. And that same kind of, like, dedication to pursuing his dream, to doing all the work, and this idea that if you work really, really hard, anything is possible, was something very moving to us. So we were going to. So what we decided once we decided to embark on this was that we were going to try our best to mitigate to mitigate the risks, which was a formidable task. And, like, we're often asked about our partnership. So Jimmy and I are married. We're also directing and producing partners. I come from the nonfiction world. Like, this is my 6th film. This is our 2nd together, and Jimmy has had 20 years in the vertical world as a professional climber and National Geographic photographer. So it was, yeah, thank you. Thank you. He just said it's not that impressive. I'm very impressed. That's why we're together. But it was this kind of marriage of skills and marriage of visions, and this idea that, we could work together and really get into the guts of this film and wrestle with it, and also hope that it transcended the idea of rock climbing. Like, we were inspired in a bigger way by Alex's story. And then when it turned into a love story, that became very complicated for us too. Right? I mean, like, we kind of saw our relationship play out with Alex and Sani, and that was a little awkward, but also interesting. But anyway, so we're going to tell the story of the night before, which is a story we don't really talk about very often, the night before Alex's climb. So it also shows how much preparation went into the making of this film, which is basically our main rule was that the needs of the film could never trump the needs of Alex. So for, in a documentary that actually translated to, like, we could never actually ask Alex if he was going to climb or when he's going to climb. So we just had to be ready for 2 years, or rather Jimmy had to be ready for 2 years. Yeah.
Well, part of the filming process for us was trying to figure out how to deal with the logistics of filming the high angle aspect of it. And so we had built this team of, elite professional climbers in order to film it. And they also had to be incredible filmmakers, so there wasn't a very big pool of people, but that to choose from. But part of that idea of being a professional climber was that everybody on the team had worked on both sides of the lens, and we were very sensitive to what it feels like to be filmed and when you introduce a camera to a situation. And that was the kind of sensitivity that we really needed to bring to this film, because we wanted to insulate Alex from the pressures of production. And so the night before we went...
Can I just say one thing?
What's that?
So, like, we weren't allowed to ask Alex when he was going to free solo, but I did have 2 conversations with him, which was, one, I'm pregnant with James, our 2nd child. You're not allowed to free solo in these 2 months. And then 2 years later, I was like, oh, it's our elder daughter's, like, last day of nursery school.
Oh, yeah. So she was at graduation at nursery school in New York, and I was in the room hanging out with Alex, with my DP, and he was kind of stretching, and we were all kind of knew that he was getting close to this moment where he was maybe going to free solo El Cap, but of course we couldn't ask him, and it takes days to rig this thing, so we're kind of on pins and needles, but it's 5 o'clock at night, and we figure, well, there's no way he's going to go tomorrow, so my DP and I start talking about, well, maybe we should go climbing tomorrow, and Alex looks over and he says, what if I decide to go scrambling tomorrow? He won't say free soloing, he says scrambling. And we were like, oh, really? And he's like, yeah, I'm thinking about scrambling tomorrow. And we were like, okay, well, we were hoping to go climbing. And he's like, no, I'm serious, I'm gonna go scrambling tomorrow. And I was like, oh, okay. And then he said, do you think you guys are gonna be ready if I go scrambling tomorrow? And I was like, yeah, it's 5 p.m., no problem. Takes 3 days to rig this stuff, totally casual. And he's like, okay, well, I'm going scrambling tomorrow. So I was like, okay. So I'm sitting there, and we're trying to play it cool. So I hang out for another 45 minutes just playing it cool, like. we're not in a big rush.
So good at that.
And he said, don't you guys have to go get ready? And we were like, yeah, it's fine. The sun is still on the approach. I don't want to climb up there when it's hot, you know. And then, of course, we ran out after 45 minutes. I made the call to the team. Everybody deployed. But I think it's indicative of kind of a lot of the issues that we were kind of dealing with, like never making him feel like there was a pressure for him to do this, and trying to be sensitive and insulating him from all of the kind of ethical questions that we were dealing with. But
And being planned for the day in every single way. Like, we were editing at the same time as we were shooting for 2 years. And as Alex rehearsed the climb, like, our high-angle crew and Jimmy rehearsed the shots. So as we were editing, we were able to refine, you know, the 3 money shots we absolutely had to get for the story. And it allowed us to be ready on the big day. But he did wait till after Marina graduated from nursery school. And I did arrive just in time.
yes. But anyways, this clip is...
Yeah, no, this clip gets to the relationship and also kind of the ethical questions we were negotiating.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Did you take ibuprofen this morning?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm going to right now also.
For your ankle?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not like super stoked when he goes soloing. Because he's already a big part of my life. I tell Alex I love him all the time, and he shows me that he loves me all the time. And really
Yeah.
But I also tell him that I also need words of affection. We work on that. In terms of learning how to communicate emotion, Alex has a long way to go. I said, sometimes I'm going to tell you how I feel, and I just need you to say, it totally makes sense that you feel that way. He was like, yeah, I can understand why you feel that way. I was like, I don't really think that you do, but I'm glad that you're trying.
Alex, we have excellent team skills.
Well, I feel like we're not quite killing it, but we're doing
Really?
well.
I think we're doing great.
I'm very happy for Alex and Sonny that it works so well. And I think I'm just impressed by their relationship. But to free solo at that level, you really have to have the mental armor. Having that romantic relationship around is detrimental to that armor. You have to focus, and inherently a close romantic relationship removes that armor, and you kind of can't have both at the same time.
There's always something that has to give you the confidence to go out and free solo a route. So sometimes that confidence just comes from feeling super, super fit. Sometimes that confidence comes through preparation and rehearsal. But I mean, there's always something that makes you feel ready. There's something to be said for like soloing a bunch of pitches to like get into that right space.
Stressful. It's unreal.
And as much as I trust Alex and I know that he's really methodical, if you're pushing the edge, eventually you find the edge.
But there's some things that you're like, well, you just have to push that far because they're just that cool. You know, Cap is that cool.
There's incremental advances that happen in all kinds of things, but every once in a while there's just this iconic leap. Soloing El Cap, if he pulls this off, is this quantum leap. It is hard to imagine somebody up there by themselves without a rope, whereas pretty much all the other big cliffs around here, I can kind of get it.
How many times have you soloed both those street style?
Well, Astroman 3 or 4 times, but the rostrum, I mean, literally like 50, 60.
Wait, you've sold the rostrum 50 or 60 times?
It was like part of the circuit, and I would go there and I would do it at least twice. Like I was just glommed on. Not like out of fear, but just kind of like this
Yeah,
is
because
how
you're so tight.
Yeah.
No, I love that about soloing.
My footwork gets really good.
Yeah, really. Yeah, totally.
But it's not for anybody else. This is just
just because
for
you
me.
feel
And
like
that's after us, man. People are like, "Oh, we want to film you up there," and I'm like, not interested, not even slightly. For me, it was so incredibly important to be doing it for the right reasons.
I mean, I think I'm still doing everything for the right reasons, and I'm still totally stoked. But I feel like from the outside observer, you know, they'd be like, "Oh, he's got a movie crew. Like, clearly that's the wrong reasons," you know.
The worst thing about having a film crew is if it changes your mindset.
Please welcome the nominees for Hale County this evening. Ramel Ross, director-producer. Jocelyn Barnes, producer. Sue Kim, producer.
We thought there was going to be way less people here. And so we're not underprepared. We're just going to do something we didn't expect.
Without a rope.
Without a rope. So just to respond to Chai's, everyone likes stats. I personally dislike stats.
But we had 10 million in the box office. No, that wasn't us.
But that's strictly because of the way in which, you know, statistically black folks are kind of represented, and just the general relationship between poverty and you know, access to resources and stuff. And so I will start with this. What if, and I've said this before, but I think it's worth saying now, what if every single image of an American was made by the British? What if every single, for the history, actually not every, let's say like 95.9, like how would us Americans feel? Would we feel represented? Would we feel like people understand us? That's kind of what has been the case for black culture. It's just haven't had the opportunity to make or image ourselves, which means I would argue that no one here, including myself, has never seen a black person before. We actually might not even know what that looks like. And so my entrance into making the film with Jocelyn Barnes and Sue and many, many, many others, really close team, Maya Krinsky and Rob Moss, was through photography and sort of talking about the problem of the image and the problem of cinema as much as its power and as much as its, you know, versatility and its visceralness. And so, what should I say now?
You should talk about your collaboration.
Oh yeah, so, oh no, this was important too, right? So, golden age of cinema. I don't know. Golden age of documentary, I don't know. I would like to hope, I mean, to me, golden age speaks to money, and it speaks to industry, speaks to consumption, it speaks to reduction, it speaks to like this sort of offering of easy narratives. And so I would love for it to be talked about like enlightenment in the documentary genre, or like this new age of revelation, more so than we're making a lot of money, which I think is wonderful because it gives more people access. It means that there's more platforms. But I also think that it's more complicated than that. I think that the problem with diversity is that, you know, if it's not diversity of perspective, then the diversity means nothing. If it's not, you know, talking about the form of the way in which the stories are being offered, then it doesn't mean much because you're still peddling in the same logic that gives us easy connection to ideas that are extremely complex. And the reason why we're in this age of despair and issues. But Hale County is a film that is extremely interested in shooting from the interiority of the sort of black experience, as vast as that is, from Hale County. Sort of, you know, we had 1,300 hours of footage. And that's because the idea was to let meaning come, not to seek it out. So what happens when you go into someone's life and you're like, I'm gonna do this? You end up like fulfilling your own understanding of what that issue is. You look for markers of meaning that you're familiar with. Occasionally you're surprised. But what happens if you sit there past that moment and past the next moment? You realize that there's, there's myriad ways that a person can be represented, a place can be represented, that perhaps your experience of being there is a true form of knowledge of that community and of the issue at hand. And so how do you then offer that to an audience? And how do you then use all of the tools of cinema to provide something that is irreducible, something that is, complex and vast and can be constantly, engaged with. Something that I think, which I'm interested specifically in this term, is like, how do you renew the encounter? How do you renew the encounter of Blackness? How do you renew the encounter of marginalized communities? How do we get past the way in which we think we know or we understand places that we've never lived, nor situations we've never actually been? So our clip is not so long, but and it's also I think it's important to say that it's really difficult, as all films are, to show clips that are small. But specifically, I think for this film, but I think even specifically for this clip, because it comes after a moment in which Burt Williams appears, who's this really famous blackface actor who was talented, but also sort of tragically forced to sort of peddle in the stereotype of what mainstream society thought he was. And so he sort of, in the film, he's liberated in some sense. We sort of come in and we burn down the antebellum home, and he comes out of the shadows quite literally. And so this sort of montage is almost when you're allowed to sort of understand or engage with the Black Banal in a way that, conceptually and theoretically would be like sort of post race. Not possible, but you know what I'm saying.
And he's African American.
Oh yeah, and Burt Williams is a man of blackness.
Thank you.
Stop. All right.
Am I gonna be a stop for this?
Maybe.
They might want me to get in a move and do this shit, man. Nigga can't do this everywhere you go, man. Whoa, no.
You can say you straight, but I'm like, what the fuck? I thought this was brown. War ain't deep
This would be a good movie we can get enough of. That would call The World Without Guns. That'd be a bad movie, right? Without guns. It's gonna be like a funny movie too. I'm gonna show you something. You're a police, right? You police. We ain't got no guns. It's just the world without guns. We're going back in the day with spears. So people are like, put your hand on the car, man. Put your hand. You know what I'm saying? You got a spear. And then you're like, oh, he wanna run. Right in the head. We got him, sir. We got you down. Like that, and you live, you know what I'm saying? You live to fight another day, man. Or you live to run another day. You know what I'm saying? All the way you'll die if you get hit in the heart.
Let more come to your feet. Yeah, they sign there, they ain't got nothing motion. So you gonna meet me halfway?
I'll meet you all the way. Yeah, how can I meet you halfway? You don't touch your back.
Hey, up.
Yeah, how y'all?
Got my bodyguard now. Got my bodyguard. Huh? Nah. You got my bodyguard for you, Mark. Right here. You run, don't you run? He say he walk.
Well, he gonna be walking by the fast. I have to.
You scared now?
If you're scared, say you're scared. What did he say?
Nothing. You come right back around the table, man. He's right back around the table. What you said?
Please welcome the nominees for Minding the Gap: Bing Liu, director producer; Diane Kwan, producer.
I first saw a very rough cut of Minding the Gap 3 years ago, and what I saw broke my heart and gave me hope. I got to know Bing, and the more I got to know him, it also broke my heart, but gave me so much hope. He was a one-man band at that time, directing, editing, shooting, and I have to say I'm so grateful that he let me join him on this journey.
Thanks, Diane. I remember the first time we met at a coffee shop, and then you didn't finish your coffee, so I finished it for you.
Yeah, that's when I knew this is it.
That's when we knew we could do low-budget filmmaking together.
Yeah.
When I did do it for alone for a while, but I feel like with the help of Kartemquin, but I feel like it's when I started working with people, that's when I really started having a lot of great memories, and that was one of them. I think another memory is when I started working with my co-editor Josh, and then eventually staying over at his house in his guest bedroom for like a month and a half. Thanks, Allison, and your
low
kids.
Budget.
Yeah, low budget filmmaking. I remember when Josh called me one night when we were editing out of an Airbnb in Venice, where Josh lives, and we were trying to find an ending to the film and how to just take care of all these multiple endings. And he called me and he was like, "Hey man, I just smoked some weed and I was I just watched an episode of Bloodline and it did this awesome montage. We should try that." And so I tried it that night, and then we watched it in the morning, and then we went surfing, came back and talked about it. And I mean, I'm just so happy for all the people I met in this journey and all the people, many of you who are in this room. I also didn't know that there wasn't going to be a panel until an hour ago, which is probably my fault. I didn't read my emails. But the clip you're going to see is I should probably say my film has, it's set in the world of skateboarding, and what you're about to see is me going back into my story a little bit, and then it's sort of the ball up in the air about why some of the characters love skateboarding and how they use it in their lives.
Is this the board you bought here? I think you did. A while ago. I remember we had this board in the shop.
I don't buy boards that much anymore because I don't skate that much anymore.
Dude, tell me about it. I don't skate nearly enough. I don't really remember when I first met you. You were just like kid that was always there, like you'd come into the skate shop. I don't know, we'd talk about random stuff. And then that happened with a lot of kids. And they could come in and be like, "Yeah, dude, my parents suck," or "This is going on." And they'd come in and unload, But, like, you were introverted. And I didn't know. And I remember distinctly asking you if you were gay. Do you remember that at all?
No.
Like, I asked you, like, "Dude, are you gay? Like, what do you, like, I knew you had some huge weight on you." And you were like, "No, dude," But I can't remember when you opened up to me about your mom and stuff. But you never really told me about anything about what was going on with you. And I guess in retrospect now, when I look at it, I'm like, I should have totally figured that out. Like, I could tell with you from the very beginning, like, skateboarding meant more to you than just being cool and having friends. Like, it was your thing to, like, get away. It was kind of a life or death thing.
To other people, it's funny, haha, you know, oh, these guys are crazy. But in reality, I think it's a control thing. You fucking have to control the most minute, small details to make you feel normal in a world that's not normal.
It would kind of be like a drug in a way. Like, I could seriously be on the verge of having a fucking mental breakdown, but as long as I'm able to go skate, then I'm completely fine. As soon as the effect of the drug wears off, it just comes back to you.
Please welcome the nominees for Of Fathers and Sons. Tal Alderki, director. Ansgar Friedrich, producer. Aoife Kemma, producer. Tobias N. Ziebert, producer.
Good evening. I think not only us get tired, so my team just arrived from Berlin, the jet lag, so it's 6 o'clock in the morning for us. Thank you so much. I mean, I tried to catch the light. I couldn't recognize. I get confused all the time, looking left and right to know the times and to. So, Fathers and Sons, since a long journey through radical family, and the moment we start doing this film, I mean, always when somebody asks me about motivation, I start to talk until he stopped me, because it's complicated me as a Syrian, like, and what happened to my country and how it's end, like it's above everything, it's end with a nightmare still happening. And how we can describe this, how we can tell this to the people with the less violence, because people, I believe, in documentary get tired, and not in documentary, from news actually, always get tired from seeing Syrian blood on the ground and seeing the catastrophe, seeing just dead people every day and every day. So there's still something missing in the image. So we tried to go more deeply into what's happening, how it's happening, why there's a violence in our world, why people become more radicalism, why it start for a good purpose and end as a nightmare. So why nobody does anything? And then all these questions, everything come to my mind. Why did my main character in my previous film become radicalism and more religion instead of after all this sacrifice? Like, it's difficult. All those 1,000 questions lead us to go and make a story about a child called Osama, 13 years old. His father named him Osama because he's in love with Osama bin Laden. And so about people who don't have a choice in their life in the moment they're born. Maybe we are all don't have choice. Maybe we are lucky to end up here, to be what we want to be as a filmmaker. Maybe we all love films and we do this film and we live from this film. So So it's a story of it's an arc, real-time shooting about a child, innocent, end up as a jihadist, and he's still like inside him, he still have his childhood. Is it a possibility to change this? I believe it's a possibility after this experience, 2.5 years in this family. So observing him and being close to him and thinking about him, thinking about my son, because we all children, we all sons, we all fathers. We all appreciate family. We don't know, sometimes we give wrong things. We do things that from love to our kids, but we do the worst to them. We do without understanding that we do that. The father in the film love his kids, and you see this how he cuddling him, but he sacrificed with him for ideology. So the uprise, I believe the uprise of radicalism is very strong, and there is big wave still happening, not only in religion, also in nationals. In every people become really radical, they don't want to listen, they just build walls and walls and walls between their neighbors. I mean, we select one scene, it's like the first scene, the first morning for us in this family, in this society. It's a morning we wake up and the kid bring a bird and he try to imitate his father. You understand from this scene the legacy of violence, how the meaning of growing up in radical, with a radical father. So it's exactly as it's edited in the film, and here we are, and we appreciate to be here. I'm so happy to be with the team there and here everywhere. Thank you.
شو هذا؟
عصفور.
منين؟
كعسنا في الغرفة هو أخوه. بس أخوه هاي غرفتنا. أخوه ما كعسنا هسه عم ندور عليه.
حرام هيك يا عصفور.
ها؟
حرام هيك.
وين كاسينو بس شو مكان؟
ما شو هذا فرجيه؟
بينقر.
مريح أقول. هذا بري.
إيه. بخاف من نقرته أنا عملنا هيك لا
اسمه حرام هيك حاصره؟
لا ما نعصره ما نسيف على الحسين يتحرك.
ما بدك تطيروا؟
ها؟
ما بدك تطيروا؟
بدي يطيروا إذا هذا بيحطوا عنا في القفص.
ما بيعيش هذا القفص.
نقول لخطاب وقلت روح تيسر. قال لي ها عفول وزدت له أشوف.
حطوا هون ليك. يديروا على الشباك. ليش ذبحوه؟ والله انا قلت له اذبحه عشان ما يموتوه بالعذاب لخاف. السكين حجي؟ ليش ما قال؟
أنا
ما ماتون؟ شلون؟
كان خطاب بدي يذبحه وقال عطر بالسكين هون عدي بس ما يسرق. حطينا له راسه مثل ابويا ما ذبح حدا ثاني.
الله اكبر.
قال على قلك كعشو
الله اكبر الله اكبر.
انا ذبحته لانه قلعته من
الله
هون.
اكبر الله اكبر.
كان يبكي ساعة.
ما انهبلت على ابوك لما بس؟ لا بقى تحبس لا عصافير ولا محزنون. عصفور اللي بيجي اذا بتلاقيه محبوس تفتح له الباب. فهمت؟
يعني ابو قتل حرام؟
لا حلال. هو الله سبحانه وتعالى اباحه.
وخلقوا لقتلا.
لا خلقوا غير لكن ممكن يكون
Please welcome the nominees for RBG: Betsy West, director-producer, and Julie Cohen, director-producer.
Hi, everybody. Wow, I agree with Talal. I mean, we feel extraordinarily lucky to be here with this amazing group of films. It was 4 years ago that Julie and I were talking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and how she had just kind of blown up on the internet as the notorious RBG. It was in the wake of several stinging dissents that she had written on the Supreme Court as it was moving to the right. People were responding to her words, and there were tote bags, and there were mugs and T-shirts, and even tattoos extolling RBG. And you know, Julie and I had both worked on a project about the modern women's movement, and we knew that there was a whole other part of her story, how as a young lawyer, she really became the legal architect of the women's movement, you know, arguing and winning equality for women under the US Constitution. So, you know, we're talking about doing this project and thinking that it's going to take, you know, to do a film about a sitting Supreme Court justice, it's going to take some time. And at one point I remember we were saying, gee, I wonder if people will be interested in this when we get done. I mean, has RBG peaked?
Literally. Yeah, so I guess we'll cut to today with the news. I imagine that you've heard that after her surgery in December, Justice Ginsburg was back on the court for oral arguments, back on the bench for the first time today. You know, it's just sort of reflecting the process, you know, everything through that 4 years. I mean, not the level of interest seemed so high, and yet through the whole process of making the film, and then from the time of the release of the film a year ago, things seemed to happen by the year, by the month, by the week, by the day that made RBG's story feel ever more relevant and ever more a focus. But for the film, we really were trying to balance and weave telling the current day story and some elements of verite documentary with a lot of history. We decided pretty early on that we weren't afraid of history. We weren't afraid of things that were audio tape only. We weren't afraid of getting into archival stuff. We wanted to see RBG as she is now, an amazing 85-year-old woman, as well as her whole life. So the clip that you're going to see really is in the history mode of our film, and here it is.
It was an afternoon argument, so I was first up in the afternoon, and I didn't dare have lunch that day.
She seemed nervous. Her eyes were wide with sort of anticipation. It's very intense and austere and important and very male, and it's the whole thing feels like. I was really kind of scared. We sat down at the council table and had all these huge case books for me to help her with cites. And the court began with the oyez, and here we are.
Oh yay, oh yay, oh yay. All persons having business before the Supreme Court of the United States are admonished to draw near and give their attention, for the court is now sitting.
Ginsburg.
I was terribly, terribly nervous, but then I looked up at the justices and I thought, I have a captive audience. I knew that I was speaking to men who didn't think there was any such thing as gender-based discrimination. And my job was to tell them it really exists.
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court. Women today face discrimination in employment as pervasive and more subtle than discrimination encountered by minority groups. Sex classifications imply a judgment of inferiority. The sex criterion stigmatizes when it is used to protect women from competing for higher-paying jobs, promotions. It assumes that all women are preoccupied with home and children. These distinctions have a common effect. They help keep woman in her place, a place inferior to that occupied by men in our society.
There was not a single question. I just went on speaking, and I, at the time, wondered, are they just indulging me and not listening? Or am I telling them something they haven't heard before, and are they paying attention?
The justices were just glued to her. I don't think they were expecting to have to deal with something as powerful as a sheer force of her argument that was just all-encompassing. And they were there to talk about a little statute in the government code. I mean, it was just, we seized the moment to change American society.
In asking the court to declare sex a suspect criterion, we urge a position forcibly stated in 1837 by Sarah Grimke, noted abolitionist and advocate of equal rights for men and women. She said, "I ask no favor for my sex.
All I ask of our brethren is that they take their feet off our necks."
Wow. So this is my favorite night of Oscar week, because when you see all these films together, when you see all 10 of them together, there's no denying the transformative power of documentary film. You know, for us, making a documentary, it's painful, we struggle, sometimes we think we have nothing. These filmmakers have spent years toiling away, not because they thought they were going to rub shoulders with Lady Gaga, Ramel Ross, or even for the red carpet, because I don't think any of these filmmakers thought they would be here today. They would be walking the red carpet in Hollywood. So what they've done and the work they've done, they're here because it touched our hearts and it touched our soul, and in each of these films has a potential to change our lives. So thank you, and a round of applause for these amazing filmmakers. And thank you guys for coming tonight. That concludes our show, and see you at the Oscars.